It's Christmas! The worst time of year for the cynical, but actually, I quite like it. I know, hard to believe, right?
I think Christmas is a time for falling back into the child you once were and to relive Christmas past. That's why each year I aim to watch each Christmas special under the pretense it's Christmas again, and I love giving myself pointless jobs. Daniel, it's Christmas. You can stop being cynical for half an hour. It's become a tradition, a silly tradition, I know, but it's fun to see if I've overlooked a special that I previously disliked. I realised that I never broadcasted a ranking on the beloved and the despised Christmas specials till now.
I'm going to go from worst to best, reviewing them as a form of explanation. Starting with
Capaldis' final story is, in my opinion, the worst of the lot. It's a story that really shouldn't exist, as it originally didn't. Moffat didn't want to miss out on the Christmas spot, so he moved his final story one ahead, but clearly had an ending planned for Series 10. It's no fun on Christmas because each time I see it, I just become angry.
No turkey? You fucking idiot, Jeremy! You total fucking idiot! That was your job, you fucking moron!
If I hear any more language like that from you, young lady, you're in for a jolly good smack bottom.
It is time for some real criticism though. The story is all over the place. Testimony looks dreadful with its transparent effect and plan to record the words of the soon-to-be departed. An idea that is stretched across the runtime with enough substance to fill an interesting mini-episode.
there's Daleks. Wait, why are the Daleks here? I mean, we all love Rusty. What do you mean who's Rusty? The Dalek. From Into the Dalek.
Lots of things feel unnecessary and out of left field, leading to my anger and disappointment that the brilliant Peter Capaldi went out on such a low. The best parts along with Capaldi is David Bradley as the First Doctor, beautifully replicating the mannerisms of Hartnell, with some rampant sexism thrown in.
If I hear any more language like that from you, young lady, you're in for a jolly good smack bottom.
This has been discussed lots of times across the internet, but I've always felt it betrayed the views of the 60s, not a time-travelling alien. I hope that one day my opinion on the episode will change and I can call 12's epilogue a sweet ending to the era. I mean, that's probably just wishful thinking, but at least it can't get any worse.
Bill Bailey's in this one. I like Bill Bailey, but I don't like this.
Primarily, it's the pacing. It's a simple story that for once is hindered by the 1 hour runtime, padded with an extended and unrelated escape sequence, pushed down with 11 being a big child.
For God's sake!
This hammock has developed a fault.
Further padded by a bizarre deforestation plot that doesn't have anything to say beyond "that's bad." The child acting in this episode is not dreadful, but they are both a little whiny. In fact, this is not one of Moffat's best scripts. At the end of the day, Matt Smith gives a brilliant performance, and I believe there to be a lovely story here about family during wartime. Yet, the plotting makes the story really boring.
It needs some more Bill Bailey as well. Capaldi's first special takes the next spot. Last Christmas features an Arctic base with a facehugger and a notable appearance from Sigourney Weaver. I really mean Nick Frost as Santa, a very strange addition to the episode. I like Nick Frost, but I hate this, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm not happy with the Santa representation. They create a strange decision when you include Santa Claus in a story, because how do you tackle his realness? You play it as a villain, making Santa out as a bad guy, and it's not a good look. You could play it relatively straight, like this story does, opening the door for some awful meta humour. It's funny because Santa's real.
Bet there were some awkward questions after this episode aired. But honestly, it's such a weird bit of the plot that they focus on so much.
Some of this bad humour also translates to the fact they're riffing on Alien. Capaldi does have some really great lines within this episode that managed to make me laugh, even for a story that I wasn't really looking forward to.
You will be glad of my help.
Happy Easter.
Cool exit line, though.
The story really took me back into 2014 and Clara and how she acts so entitled. For example, she was angry at the Doctor for something he couldn't have known because his only source on the matter was a lie she told him.
You never told me he was dead. You said he made it back.
I lied.
She wants to die at one point. Like, I've forgotten all about that stuff. That all being said, I did quite enjoy watching the episode this year. I'm not moving its place in the ranking, but I really did like the dream concept, even though I've seen it done better a few years before in Series 5's Amy's Choice.
Although I'm not very good with this holy hand thing. I will hold Clara's hand, but that's...
Shona, take his hand.
No, I'm fine. This is very Christmassy, isn't it?
Oh, we returned straight back to Capaldi's era with the return of Dr Mysterio, a story that is heavily inspired by superheroes and comics. Doctor Who could fit into any genre, and I think it riffs off that premise really nicely. There's a few jokes and stereotypes that I believe have been done on purpose. If not, Moffat is just being lazy. I really hope it's intentional because of the way this actor plays it.
Mind if I come in?
I find the episode rather charming because of this light tone, yet slightly embarrassed by some choices such as this man's over-expressive Batman voice.
Or what?
The interview? We could get dinner.
Dinner.
Do you eat dinner?
Of course I eat dinner.
Or a brain with eyes. It feels like the early 2000s where superhero movies weren't as developed. It reminds me a lot of the Daredevil movie from like 2003 where you get cringy suits and lines like this.
Please understand it's against my personal code to cause lasting harm to any individual.
However, light to moderate injury is fine.
I've said this theme works, but some bits could do with a bit more sprucing up. Leaning into the comic style, for example, some scenes already follow that plan and are pretty great moments. The story is rather sweet, even if some jokes are a bit, grungy for Christmas Day.
But Lucy is your favorite.
Who says?
And lack subtlety. When the episode aired, I hated the story's cringeworthy aspects. Now I see the importance it has for the 12th Doctor. To jump into an adventure with the Doctor untarnished would be a huge mistake in terms of narrative, especially with the year gap. I see that gap as the time the Doctor spent with River. And I understand the episode's title. Once you cut back the superhero elements, the return of Doctor Who. Sadly, Capaldi peaks on my list with The Husbands of River Song. I know a few people that really love this one, so I'll try and explain why I don't really like it, but I think it's just because it's not for me. I think it's how silly everything is. For example, Greg Davies hamming it up as a giant robot king.
Attend me, woman!
I fly to you!
And Matt Lucas, well, being Matt Lucas as he stumbles onto set. I actually quite like Nardole in Series 10 as he delivers some good jokes and adds an interesting dynamic to the series. He's quite an odd companion because he's not really like any other, he's not human, and he's almost the Doctor's butler, ending up being quite wise. Here, he's comic relief along with Davies and of course the way Moffat writes River Song. All that makes the episode feel bloated with comedy lines. There is a lot of scenes that are humorous that I really like. The scene when the Doctor enters the TARDIS.
God!
It's bigger! Oh, yes. On the inside.
And his sense of sarcasm tones down the episode. As for a plot, River has married Hydroflax in order to take and sell the diamond implanted in his head during a firefight to the rightful owners, whose third party is evil because everyone around them is a criminal. What? Not your conventional story, but I like its quirkiness. What I don't like is the silly aesthetic of the episode. The episode is written quirky, and because of this, it needs a quirky style. Yet, lots of elements don't work. The lumbering body and the decapitations, or River's relationship and Matt Lucas's face? I have more examples than cuts in this sequence. It all comes to a head on Beryllium, completing River's story in a really sweet way. Oh, you've taken it too far. As I look back on the episode, I was truly surprised by how much I liked it. I know I hated it when it was first released. It's odd that out of the first 5, 2 have been far more pleasant to watch than I thought.
Just a thought, you probably shouldn't do that in a restaurant.
A little bit controversial, but Tennant's final story doesn't make the top 5. For me personally, I don't think it's a Christmassy Christmas special. There is no mention of it within the story. Oh look, Wilf's got antlers. I'm really feeling festive now. Nothing makes me rock around the Christmas tree more than death and genocide.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, and you. The episode is more of a swan song for the RTD era than a Christmas special. Of course, reflections and endings are also part of the Christmas period, so I watch it each year. As for the episode itself, I'm not a fan of its righteous nature, due to a lot of lines hinting at some kind of greater power at work, and the way Ten acts is beyond childish, and nothing like the man he once was. If only there was a piece of extended media that could fill in this gap, it would all feel a lot more natural. When I watch it, it always has the power to make me cry. Wilf's reaction at Donna's wedding, "I don't want to go, there's so much more" speech, and the moment 10 hears the Time Lords returning, electing to take the gun and break his own moral code. Speaking of Time Lords, they are portrayed as titans corrupted by war. Their appearance magnifies the stakes tenfold because of their reputation they've established within New Who without even being there. Now they plan to bring Gallifrey out of the Time War. In addition, the Master is back, with Sim giving another great performance.
Dinner time!
Yikes, maybe not as good. But I think the show realised that Skeletor was not a good idea, becoming a bump in the story of the Master. Speaking of things that don't work, the pacing is quite odd. The highs are highs and the lows are lows. In part 2, we escape in a huge scene and then mope around on a green Banakatalata ship for a good 25 minutes before coming back. It all comes across as quite bloated, when the 2-hour runtime has plot breaks. As a word, I describe it as self-fellatio, but for the love of God, if you don't know what that means, don't Google it. This story has always been a weird one for me. I was expecting a very black and white retelling of the original story, with the Doctor thrown in for a few scenes and there to be a creature of some kind haunting him, maybe playing up to the idea that Scrooge only changed because he was scared into it and wasn't being good for the sake of it, but only to save his soul. As a child, I didn't understand the story's emotional centre because I was blind to that kind of thing. I was after aliens, and I suppose I still am. As a so-called adult, I see that evil Dumbledore has his timeline overwritten, and his heart melted. I now admire Moffat for not taking the easy way out with this script, like a weaker writer would. He blended the story because you could easily just follow the novella plot, but he reworked it more than he was expected to.
There is millions of Dickinson's inspired stories, so at least this one stands out. Performances delivering the script are great, especially Michael Gambon taking the starring role, blended with some brilliant lines. There is also an element of tragedy, due to Abigail being the security on a loan, something that I was alluding to earlier, and a ticking clock each time she's awoken, bringing her closer to death. Quite a serious loan then. I know loan companies are ruthless vampires, but jeez. Other than that, I agree with my child self in not liking the episode. I think it's due to the sharks. I don't feel like they justified their existence within the story because they don't do much with them apart from use them as like reindeer. I don't think that they pose much of a threat, and I think that they look far too cartoony for their own good. But there is a sweet story here about young love and love lasting a lifetime. But it's just a shame that you have to crawl through so much crap to get to it. So that's why the story stays here.
When girls are crying, are you supposed to talk to them?
I have absolutely no idea.
This episode's high placement is due to my admiration of the Cybermen. This was an almost perfect story to me, as close as a year ago. Now, it's still brilliant, but there is a certain elephant in the room, or rather, Cyber King. But first, this story is your simple invasion that I really love. There is something about grounding the villains in our daily lives that I really like, and the simple invasion story allows a lot of action, which is something that I kind of go crazy for, if you haven't been able to tell already. Yet, this story is a period piece with a very interesting new character mentioned in the title. I think that in a different timeline, David Morrissey didn't don an eye patch and slay walkers in The Walking Dead, but became the Doctor. He takes to this role brilliantly. The man who has nothing, who has taken the persona of the Doctor due to a cyber USB holding files on the man himself. RTD excels in this script, adding plenty of adventure, action, and flutters of humour. There is not a lot that beats a Christmas good versus evil story with action for the kids, emotions for the adults, and fun for everyone. Yet, what is going on in Act 3? As CG goes, the Cyber King looks great. I mean, this thing is 10 years old at this point, but I am no longer 8. I look much further past a huge walking Cyberman. The story's soul is David Morrissey looking for his family, and he doesn't even get to save them. His son is saved by the Doctor while he watches. You can't throw the wool over my eyes with a big explosion anymore. Who do you think you are, Michael Bay? The next Doctor plot is weakened because of this and fails the character once his secret is exposed. The episode is about the next Doctor, not the Doctor. And they keep piling it on with the whole Bravo scene, but I think a better theme, or lesson I suppose, from the story would be that you don't need to be the Doctor, the original, you might say, to be a hero.
No. Info stamps are just facts and figures. All that bravery. Saving Rosita, defending London town. And the invention, building a TARDIS, that's all you.
And that could even be achieved by giving David Morrissey some kind of victory moment. My childhood nostalgia wants to ignore it, but I can't give this story a higher ranking for having this brilliant story that just scrapes the surface with its depth. I've just realised that in that entire paragraph, I did not once mention David Morrissey's character by his actual name. The Time of the Doctor takes 5th place in my rankings. It's a story acting less as a story and more of the wrapping up of Moffat's plan. Of course, this is the end of Matt Smith's era, and there is the small issue of reaching the max regenerations according to Doctor Who lore, making this the episode that everyone who dislikes the Time as Children plot pipes up and says, "Not anymore!" I should really leave the house more often. This serves as a lovely ending to Matt's tenure, beating the end of time because of its balance in story and looking back. They incorporate lots of elements from the past 3 series, the Crack, Gallifrey, and of course the Balloon Man dance. is not quite like any other adventure on this list because it's not an adventure, it's a character piece on 11. There is also something poetic about the idea of an old man inside a young body aging, and for the Doctor to reach his predicted end, and what that might look like. How much you enjoy this episode is also going to depend on how much you like Moffat as a writer and how he's handled the whole arc. For me, I think that it doesn't really make sense, even though I like the elements that the Doctor is mending toys on a little town called Christmas. I don't think it's really the epic war that we were promised.
I don't get it.
In terms of Christmas and its inclusion in this Christmas special, it's extremely limited. There's just a few bits, but I can't say I feel festive after watching it, more emotional. The climax is excellent, although this isn't just an issue with this episode but a lot of recent Who. I call it token bad guys, devised for you to go, hey look, it's a Sontaran. There's no reason for them to really be there, but they are. Take the Daleks and the passion, the fear that the Doctor should have once he meets them, but I think the more that you have them appear just cheaply without them being the full focus, the worse that they become, and the more predictable that I find them, so that I don't really get excited when they turn up anymore. Because of this and the focus on arc stuff, I can't give this story a higher ranking. I mean, I would if it was possible to briefly summarise what was happening within this arc. The Snowmen takes 4th place, and it's the highest Smith episode in my ranking. I was rather impartial to the story for many years, but since last year, I've really enjoyed it. I think it's because this story is quite fun. I mean, Strax is great. The worm joke is brilliant.
Where is it? Where's Watson?
I sent you to get the memory worm.
Did you? When? Who's he? What are we doing here? Look, it's been snowing.
There is a fantasy element and an element of adventure to be had within this lovely setting. Chewing it up is Clara, and I think she's my favourite variant. I believe it to be how they're written. They clash with the Doctor. They're resourceful. They have a nice accent. Sorry, I was thinking about Richard E. Grant. He plays Simeon, the Great Intelligence. I now understand that reference. He plays menacing quite well, even if his help is earned in a silly way. I'll be your friend seems like a bizarre way to recruit people. Of course, this is only the beginning of this conflict in Series 7, but it bridges the gap between companions nicely. There isn't too much to say on this, but it's a fun adventure.
Because these are the gauntlets, aren't they?
Sir, emergency! I think I've been run over by a cab!
The Christmas Invasion is Doctor Who by numbers. It leads to such a great story. I'm a huge fan of invasion stories, as I've mentioned many times in this video. When a capsule looking for life finds alien life, they do not intend on making first contact peacefully. The Doctor has just had a case of being from the north and is taking a while to recover from an association with Yorkshire. The Sycorax are very simple Doctor Who villains. They seek only world domination and have amazing prosthetics for 2005. There's not really much under their skin though. I mean, they do look like someone peeled a rotten apple. Saying that, RTD was able to establish a warrior race, something that Series 11 villains can only dream of. Oh look, he's got teeth on his face, that's interesting. Oh wait, we'll never mention it again. The structure of this episode is marvellous, as it builds up to the payoff, the Doctor returning and saving the day. A lot of my joy from those scenes are probably due to having a link to them as a child, but nevertheless they are exciting. It's a safe plot, but could be quite predictable. But then again, so's Christmas. Deal with it. Deal with it. Is it 2010?
The Runaway Bride is the perfect story, though it is placed at number 2, so see that as you will. The episode is about a bride, Donna Noble, who is teleported to the TARDIS as she walks down the aisle. Why? Because it's all the plan of a creature called the Rachnos, who plans to feed her to its children, fattening her up with huon particles implanted by her fiancé who is working with the enemy. It's a story as old as time. This story always makes me smile with the dynamic between the Doctor and Donna, the scene on the motorway. It's just a comforting story with plenty of characteristics I've mentioned, such as adventure and humour. It's a story that anyone can watch because you don't need any prior knowledge of Doctor Who, which I think makes it perfect for watching it on Christmas Day. If you take episodes like the Snowmen, you have to explain the whole Clara thing, and you have to explain Amy Pond and the Doctor and his situation currently. With this one, you have a few mentions of Rose because she just departed in the previous story, but they don't put that into like the forefront of the plot. I do think that the tone in the beginning of the episode is very different from like the tone at the end when the Doctor's about to commit genocide, but other than that, it's a fully entertaining story through and through. Yet I think there is one that does it ever so slightly better. Taking the top spot is Voyage of the Dammed. During this video, I've defined a lot of features I like about Doctor Who Christmas specials. Action, adventure, humour, good characters, emotions that for such a happy time do ironically tend to be grief. All things demonstrated well within this episode. This story is full of energy, progressively piling on problems that feel like the perfect progression of the situation. It never stops building on them like a disaster movie. I mean, where do you think they got that from? There is also some memorable set pieces, battling with blades, the Doctor's speech, and a certain forklift scene means the story never gets dull. There is of course the character of Banakatalata, someone who has been in the hearts of Whovians since 2007, mostly because of the gold star you receive once you can say his name. Clive Owen within his final scene, talking about how he has money and it's so sweet. The guy from Tracy Beaker and his wife, Foon, are memorable, if not used for some fat shaming, but this is never condoned by someone's opinion, or one that actually matters. And then we have this guy who, if he was in modern Who now, the Not My Doctors would have an absolute fit. Finally, Kylie Minogue as Astrid Peth. She's a could-be companion sacrificing herself for the sake of taking out the bad guy. Now, she does get to travel in a spiritual way. It was Christmas after all, we weren't going to kill someone and that'd be the end of it. Anyone the Doctor kissed anyway. The story's the best for me because it's just a wild ride from start to finish with plenty of the things that I like from Doctor Who Christmas specials and even good Doctor Who episodes. Yet, sometimes I feel like it's a little bit soap opera pulp. After watching all those, it's almost enough to melt my heart. Almost. It is a surprise to me though that many episodes that I once completely wrote off are beginning to creep up the list, like a lot of the Capaldi era. If you want to, you can tell me what your ranking is down in the comments below, but other than that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you did enjoy the video, and of course, Merry Christmas. Goodbye.